In this video, we will show you how to replace your starter on this Ford Explorer. This will be mounted to your engine. Let's get into it. Okay friends, let's get started on our job. The first thing you need to do is make sure you disconnect your negative battery terminal and separate it from the battery. To do that, we'll loosen this 10mm mounting nut. Once you have that loose, you should be able to give this a wiggle, lift it up and off of there, make sure you don't see any corrosion, and set that aside. Let's disconnect our mass airflow sensor. Underneath this area, you're going to find that you have a small red locking tab. We'll use an angled pick, pry that out of place. Once you've done that, you can use your index finger, squeeze on the little locking tab under here, and separate this. Give it a quick check for corrosion. Assuming that looks good, you can set it aside. Now that we have the mass airflow sensor disconnected, make your way just below it. We're going to dislodge the top area of the air filter housing from the lower aspect. To do that, you'll find that you have two clips holding it in place. Now we can start lifting this up and pulling it towards the center where the engine is. Now we can follow that air inlet tube heading up towards the throttle body. Let's disconnect this hose. To do that, you're going to find that you have a gray locking tab. Go ahead and slide that out of place, and then gently pull the line off of the air inlet tube. Continue up near the throttle body. You're going to find that you have a rubber hose that leads into this area of the air inlet tube. Go ahead and grab onto that, give it a little wiggle. Once you have it up off of there, just give it a quick squeeze. Make sure it is soft and pliable and it's not torn, worn, or damaged in any way. Move along to your 8mm headed clamp. You don't have to remove this clamp, just loosen it enough that you can remove the air inlet. Set this aside. Let's remove our air filter. You want to give that a quick inspection and set that aside. Now we can start removing the lower area of the air intake box. On this, you'll find that you have two 8mm headed bolts holding it in place. Remove the pair. Now with both of those bolts out of there, let's continue on to this plastic trim piece. Go ahead and grab onto that, lift it up diagonally, and slide it out of position. Take hold of the air inlet box, lift it up and out of the vehicle. Now with that out of the way, you have a clear view of the starter under this area. Let's continue on by disconnecting the electrical connectors. To do that, you'll find that you have a small red cover. Pry that out of place and set it aside. You will be reusing that. With the cap out of the way, you can start removing the 13mm headed nut that's closest towards the front of the vehicle. Take hold of that wire and slide it out of place. Give it a quick check for corrosion. We will be cleaning this up a little bit more in a minute. Set it aside. Now that we have the larger wire off of the starter, pause on the smaller wire. We're going to continue on to the two pieces of mounting hardware that hold the starter on. Now for the rearward one, you're going to find that you have a small wire connector holding it to the stud of the mounting hardware. We'll just use an angled pick, or you can probably use a pry bar, and gently pry this out of place. Now with that off of there, we can set that aside. Now let's use a 13mm to remove each one of these studs. There's that one as well. Now let's move along this area. We'll use a trim tool to dislodge this wiring harness from the battery tray. Once you have that separated, you can make your way down here to where the shift selector rod connects to the transmission. Use a 15mm to loosen that. Now we can grab onto that shift lever, give it a little wiggle, and separate it. Just swing that up and out of the way. Now we can grab onto the starter, give it a little wiggle, and then gain access to our last mounting wire. We'll use a 10mm to separate that. Remove the wire from the starter. And now we can remove the starter from the area. There it is, friends. Before we continue with the installation, it's a good idea to make sure you clean the mounting areas on each one of the wires where it will connect onto your starter. For this, we'll just use some fine grit sandpaper and give it a quick scuff. Make sure you don't see any rust or foreign debris in the area. We'll do the same on the other side, and then we'll do the same to the other wire. All right, let's get ready to install our brand new starter. We'll take this and start putting it in position, but before we fully mount it, it's important to make sure that you start on the smaller wire and snug the mounting nut. Put that smaller wire on the smaller stud here. Should want to slide all the way down. You'll find with your starter it came with a locking washer and a mounting nut. Put on the locking washer and then the nut. Now we'll bottom this out and then torque it to 44 inch-pounds. That one's torqued. Now while this is here, we might as well just do the larger wire as well. We'll start that in position, put on the new locking washer and our mounting nut. Now we'll bottom this out and then torque it to 106 inch-pounds. Now with both of those wires on there, let's continue on with our red protective cover. Slide that right on there. Continue on by putting your starter in place and starting in both of your mounting studs. Now I'll just use my socket with extension, start in this mounting bolt by hand, and then do the same exact thing to the rearward one. Once you have both of them started, bottom them out. Now that they're snug, let's torque each of those to 35 foot-pounds. Now on that rearward stud, you want to make sure that you re-secure your wiring to that. Press the gray connector onto the stud. Now we can move back to that transmission shift selector rod. Align that with the shaft coming out of your transmission. Start on your 15mm headed bolt, snug it up, and torque it to 159 inch-pounds. Now we'll resecure our wiring to the battery tray. Now with the starter fully installed, mounted to the transmission, we're going to continue on by putting in the lower aspect of the air filter box. Before you press it into position, lubricate each of your rubber ports. Now while we try to bring this down into position, we want to make sure that we align each of our alignment tabs with those two ports. As we're lining it up, you should also pay attention to your two mounting bolt holes. Assuming everything seems like it's lined up, go ahead and press it down. Give it a wiggle so it feels as though it's secured in the lower ports, and then continue on with your two 8mm headed bolts. Confirm that your lower air filter housing is secure. Now we can put on our plastic trim piece. Having a look at the bottom side, you can tell that you have two tabs that protrude out, and you have two slots in this area for them to mount into. We'll slide this underneath this area of the trim panel, align those locking tabs, and press it down and into position. Now we'll continue on to our air filter. Now we can put in the upper air filter box. You want to pay attention to the three mounting tabs on that upper air filter housing and align them with the lower air filter housing. Slide that right in there. Now we can pivot this down. Reach down in here, we'll grab those clips. Make sure they're in the locked position. Move along to where the air inlet connects to the throttle body assembly. We'll press that all the way up. Make sure it's seated perfectly all the way around. Tighten your mounting clamp. Make sure that's nice and tight so no dirty or unmetered air makes its way into your engine. Now we can reconnect our rubber hose along the top of the air inlet. We'll get this line clipped in. Listen for a click, give it a tug, make sure it's secure. Now we can reconnect our mass airflow sensor. Press this in here. Listen for a click. Lock it in with the red locking tab and give it a tug to make sure it's completely secure. Reconnect your negative battery terminal. Make sure that's nice and tight. Okay friends, we showed you how to install the starter on your vehicle. At this point, you can go ahead and close the hood and test the starter functionality, and then take it for a road test. Thanks for watching.
When only the best will do, demand TRQ. The only company that lets you view before you do. TRQ is committed to offering the highest quality aftermarket auto parts that are engineered for peace of mind. Thanks for using and viewing with TRQ.